Hi everyone, welcome to the Phonegap Cordova tutorial. What we'll cover today is what is Phonegap or Cordova. Then we'll start with a simple Hello World example and how it's set up. We'll send that up to Phonegap build and create a native app. Then we'll try a couple plugins to show you how to access those. And then give you different options for building and debugging Phonegap applications. So what is Phonegap? Let's just say Phonegap for now, because Phonegap and Cordova are really the same thing. Phonegap is housed now at Adobe, and Cordova is an Apache open source project. Phonegap allows us to convert an HTML, CSS, and JavaScript site into a native mobile app. So once you get a HTML site built, like we were doing last week, we can just do a few things to it and send it to Phonegap, and it will package it up into a native mobile app. And the reason we want it as a native app is that Phonegap gives us tools to access different device features that a web browser does not have access to, like the battery status, the contact database, the compass, GPS, things like that. So let's do a simple Hello World example. We just have to add a couple things to make it work with Phonegap. Those three things are basically a device ready function, configure a config.xml file, and add a link to the Phonegap JavaScript. So let's go over to our IDE and take a look. Okay, we have an index HTML file here. And I got this from a template at the Phonegap site, and I've modified it a little bit. But I'd recommend you go to the phonegap.com documentation, and they have all kinds of getting started files. And this is going to be built very simply. As you can see over here, I have an index HTML file, I have an index CSS file, a JavaScript, index JavaScript file, and I put in a jQuery library here too. First thing I do with is load the CSS file, our custom CSS, then the jQuery. We have a title, Hello World. Then I have a very simple page. The page container has a class of app. I have an image, an h2, a div, and we'll be using these later for putting in data that we're getting back from Phonegap. Now here I have a div, it's my device ready div. And one of the paragraphs here says it's connecting to device, or it's just loaded up, and that's what we're going to see. This paragraph is hidden. The class is event received, and if we look in the CSS here, event received, I have display to none. So initially that's going to be hidden, and we're going to see only connecting to device. Then the last thing we do, we're going to call the Phonegap JavaScript. This doesn't have to have a path, because when we upload it to Phonegap website, that website will find the file for us. But I'd like to load in after that my custom JavaScript. Let's take a look at what that's going to be doing. So I have a function, onload function here. So when the DOM is completely loaded, then it will start an event listener for device ready. And device ready is a Phonegap event that will fire when Phonegap is fully loaded. And it will play this function, on device ready. And what that does, it will change the attribute of the listening element that we just talked about to that display of none, and it'll show the other one of received to viewable. Well, let's just play this and see what it looks like. So it shows what we expect, and it says connecting to device. But what's the problem? Well, we're running it in a browser here, so it doesn't know what phonegap.js is. So that never loaded, because this is just running in a browser. It's not a native app yet. So when it was looking for the device ready event, it couldn't find it. So this never happened, this showing of the device ready layer. That's all you need to get a basic native app running. So let's take this folder of this CSS image JavaScript that, oh, I'm sorry, we'll have to go through the config XML. The other thing we need to do is look at the config XML file. And I also got this from a template at the Phonegap website. What we really want to make sure we're using the right version of Phonegap or the latest version, and that is 3.6.3. And you can view all these preferences in the documentation and what they do and customize them to your needs. And then these are the few plugins that we're going to be using later on, and we have to install those if we want to have access to them. So we have this site root with the index, HTML, and the JavaScript and CSS. So we want to compress that into a zip file. So here's my folder. I'm just going to highlight this website and compress it. It gives me an archives.zip. And I'm going to use that when I go to the Phonegap website. So to build a Phonegap application, it's as simple as going to build.phonegap.com. So here we are at build.phonegap.com, and it's easy to get started. You can build one app completely free, and there are these other plans. If you have an Adobe ID, you can sign in right away, or you can go here, create. Not a member yet, you just go and get an Adobe ID, it's free. So I'm just going to sign in. And I've deleted my apps, so I'm starting with a fresh slate here, like you will. So I'm going to upload a zip file. Here's my zip file. And then I'm going to click Ready to Build. And it'll start building iOS, Android, and Windows for me. But I notice the iOS has a problem. iOS requires you to have a developer key, and I've already gone through the trouble of installing this here. If you're developing for iOS, you'll have to go to the Apple site and sign up and go through their steps to get this developer key installed. Now something happened here, so I'm just going to hit rebuild, and it'll just rebuild the iOS version of the app. So sometimes it can be finicky. Let's see if I made any mistake here. It looks good to me. Let's see here. I'm going to delete this file and start over. Compress. Update. Now, if something doesn't happen, or if something doesn't work, you can always update your code again and choose your new zip file, and after it uploads, it'll start building again. Great, so my iOS is what I'm using, so that's working, and if you're on any of these other devices, all you have to do is point your device camera at this QR code and it will install the app on your device. So what I needed to do was install the QR reader, which is right here. And I'll point this at my monitor. And it pulls up a window saying install. Hit install. So right down here I have the Phonegap app installed on my screen. I click it. At first it comes up with looking for device, and then it turns green saying device is ready. So it worked. Okay, one more thing I should mention for Android. Just want to make sure before you do your QR scan to go to your settings and more. security. You want to make sure that under device administration that unknown sources to allow installation of apps from sources other than the Play Store. You want to have that checked so that your phone will play your app that's not coming from the Play Store but coming from it's coming from the Phonegap website. With Android, everything works similarly to what you see here. You can use a QR code scanner. You can get a free one off the Play Store and use it in exactly the same way I'm using it here. Now let's add a few other features of the build that will come in handy. Now if you go to Settings of Phonegap Build, you'll find Enable Hydration and Enable Debugging. Next time we make a change to our JavaScript, here we have to make a new archive file, and then we want to update the code, and we choose the file and hit upload, and then again point our camera at this QR code here and it will reinstall it on our device, and we can test again. But that can get a little tedious, so they've created something called hydration that we want to enable. So we're going to enable this and enable debugging for now. So I'm going to re-upload my archive. Okay, now just one more time I'm going to have to use the QR reader to capture this app and reinstall it. So now when I run the app, it says Hydra has detected a new update. So I'll press update and restart the app now, or ignore for now. So I'll hit update. And so it updates the new build and runs the app. So after this, when I upload a new zip file, I don't have to use the QR code anymore. All I have to do is close the app and restart it, and it will download the latest build. How do we debug these apps? Well, the simplest way is pressing this button here, and it opens another window called Winery, or not Winer, but Winery, and it connects magically to the device. Now you can see here that I can see everything that's happening in the app. There's a console, it'll show resources, and one of the neat things here, well, as you can see, as I scroll through these IDs and select them, they are actually highlighted on the phone. So that can be helpful in debugging. The other thing you can do is you can actually change content. I'll just say this is live. And you can see on the phone when it changes on the phone there to live. So I didn't even have to send it to Phonegap. But this isn't changing the code in NetBeans or your IDE. This is just changing it in the DOM. You can play with the DOM here, and the changes will be reflected on your device. Now let's start playing with some of the plugins that are available with Phonegap. If you want to find the version of the operating system that your device is using, or what your device is, you can use the device plugin. And how you do that is you load the plugin from the config.xml file, and that would be device, this one right here, the device plugin. Make sure that's in your config file. And in your JavaScript, I have something commented out here that will update the info, or an element with an ID of info, change the HTML to Cordova version, and then this object called device.cordova will give the version of Cordova that we're using. Similarly, we can get the device model, the device platform, and the device version. So why don't we save this, recompress and upload the file, update, archive to. So as that's uploading, and we don't have to wait for the Windows or the Android to finish since I'm just testing on iOS. So sometimes they finish first, but if this finishes, we can just, now I don't have to scan it, as I said before. All I have to do is reload it on my phone. Sorry, I guess I have to quit it first, and then reload it, and then it checks and it sees there's a new version. So it updates and restarts. Now you can see down here I have a Cordova version of 3.63. It's an iPhone 5 and running iOS 8.1. How about we add the camera plugin? So I'm going to uncomment this information here. So the camera, how the camera works, uses the navigator keyword. And then we want to get the camera function, get picture function. And of course, look at the plugin documentation at phonegap.com and it'll explain all the parameters for calling these functions and how to use them. Basically, this function on success will run this function, and on error will run this. And then there are some options for the quality and where the data will end up. So on success, when you say use this photo, this image data is populated with the JPEG data. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to change the image source on my home page to that image data. Rezip, update. Immediately, because of the way I'm calling this, it doesn't wait for a button to run that code. It just, after it displays the device information, then it just goes right in and calls this camera event. So it's going to open up the camera, which it did right here. I'll just put my hand under here. I'll take a picture of my hand. I'll say use photo, and I updated the image there on my phone. I'm going to comment out the camera thing so it doesn't happen again. Here's the battery plugin. You can get the status of the battery. Now this doesn't happen immediately. The event only happens when the battery's level changes or its plugged in status changes. It works a lot like all the other plugins. But we're going to listen for this battery status event. And when that fires, we'll run this function. And the battery status event, when it runs this function, also sends info for the data that's returned when that event happens. And the info.level gives the percentage of the battery, and info.isPlugged is a true or false setting of whether the phone is plugged in or not. And so by gathering this kind of information, you can decide whether your app is going to do certain procedures or not, if it's dependent on having the phone plugged in so that it never goes dead during an operation. That might come in handy. Okay. So just to save some time, I don't think we could wait here a while before my battery goes down. So I'm going to just plug this in and see if the event fires. Yep. Here now we see up here level 92% and is plugged equals true. If I pull it out, is plugged equals false. Alright, let's move on to the next plugin. We'll leave that one running. The Accelerometer. Now this is a fun one that you could use for games, or I'll just do the compass at the same time here. We have a success function and an error function. Here, for this example, the alert is just like a JavaScript alert, and it'll pop up a alert box on the phone in the native look and feel of the operating system of the phone or device. And what we're going to do is start a watch acceleration. So this is always going to be checking the accelerometer, and it's going to check every 500 milliseconds or every half a second. I think I'll just up this to 50 milliseconds so it's faster. I'll do the same with the compass down here. So on success of each accelerometer check, I'm going to update the DOM with acceleration x equals the acceleration x to 2 decimal places, rounding it to 2 places. And I'm doing the same with the y and z axis here, and the time when that event happened. Now the compass works a similar way. It's going to show us the heading, heading.magnetic heading, and then add degrees to the label. So let's just save these and see how they work. Alright, so now you can see the acceleration changes as I move the phone around, and the heading. Okay, last but not least, let's look at the contacts plugin. You can access the database of the device for your contacts. Here, as soon as the page loads, it's going to run the pick contact function, and that has these parameters of running a function to open the contacts, and once a contact is picked from your device, it sends back a JSON string with all the information about that contact. As soon as it loads, it should bring up the contact database and allow me to pick a name. There it is. So here we see in the console it returned all the contact information for this person. And you can learn more about how to parse JSON information in a JavaScript reference or in a Phonegap reference. And that's pretty much in a nutshell how Phonegap works and how you can use different plugins. So we discussed these plugins very briefly. Definitely have to check out the documentation for the plugins and other tips on how to use Phonegap. So there are other options for building and debugging. One option is to build or to install Phonegap locally on your machine. So everything that the Phonegap website is doing, you can control locally on your machine. You don't have to upload it to Phonegap. You're going to build it all locally. It's a bit more involved, and it's just so much easier to use the website for this class. But always know that if you want to look up how to do that, there's a lot of tutorials online on how to do that. And then if you do that, there are other ways to test your apps, either with emulators and simulators, or with a new Phonegap app, which actually connects to a Phonegap server on your local machine. So as you change code in the JavaScript or the HTML, it automatically updates your app, your native app on the phone, without having to compile your HTML. So that's very nice. The only drawback with that is that there is really no good debugging apparatus with this yet. As I was preparing this, I realized how frustrating it can be. I ran into several roadblocks that took me hours to get working again. But there's a lot of help online, which I had to go to get some things working again. Definitely know that it's a complicated system, but the website really makes it much more simple. And please, oh please, just post your questions and issues on the bulletin board so that we can all help each other out. I'd be happy to help anyone who's stuck on anything. That's it for now. Thanks.